Next stop on our Kent road trip is the village of Lamberhurst. Now, Kent, of course, is the Garden of England, and it got that reputation for all the hops that were grown here, which is why we see oast houses everywhere we go driving around Kent, and also other vegetables and fruits. Right now is cherry season, so we're seeing lots of signs for cherries for sale from local farms. And now we're just going to walk around the village and see what there is to see in Lamberhurst. Lots of lovely old buildings with shingles and half timber construction. In Lamberhurst, the high street is called the Broadway instead of the street. This is an up-close look at some of the clay tiles that are on all these roofs around here in Kent. You can see moss grows on them. I love that the sweet peas are in bloom this time of year, and I'm seeing these beautiful magenta flowers everywhere I go. So this is Holly House, which is an English listed building, and it has a holly tree growing in the front garden. But what's even more fun is it's got all this really fragrant lavender growing in front of it and rosemary, so it smells fantastic around here. Top of the hill on the edge of Lamberhurst is the Church of St. Mary the Virgin. It's been a minute since I've done a Devil's Door picture, so I had to do one because this door just looks so old and so small. There are some beautiful tombstones and monuments in this churchyard. St. Mary's is a beautiful 14th century church, and the sloping front churchyard goes down into the golf course, so there's views for miles. Our next stop here in Kent is Scotney Castle and Gardens. Once the old castle was unfit to live in, this house at Scotney Castle was built in 1837. I love that above the front door you can read the motto. Oh, I'm not going to pronounce it in Latin, but here it is. It translates to, "I scarcely call these things our own." And underneath that crest and motto, it says, "Health and happiness attend the coming and the parting friends." The estate covers 780 acres of mixed woodland, Grade 1 listed parkland, and hop gardens. There are tenant farmers which graze Sussex cattle on the property today. The walled garden is 1 acre and was built around 1840 to provide the family with fresh produce. Its octagonal shape makes the maximum use of growing space for fruit trees trained up the walls. It still grows a wide selection of fruits, vegetables, herbs, and an assortment of cut flowers which are used in the home. The old castle is thought to have been built as a fortified house as a result of the French invasions of 1377. This little viewing point in the garden was clearly built so that one could sit and look at the view down upon the old castle. Great view of the old castle from the house, and great view of the house from the old castle. It's delightful to descend into the garden and see the castle appearing in view. This is why Scotney Castle Gardens are described as romantic, because they were literally designed so that throughout you would look and see a picturesque view in various directions. This is called the Queen Mother's Border because owner Elizabeth Hussey was friends with Queen Elizabeth and her mother, and the Queen Mother came here on a visit and planted the tulip tree. These, of course, are giant sequoias or redwoods that were brought from America. There's some geese. I think they might be Egyptian geese, just standing here posing for us very nicely. I appreciate that. Except for that one who wants to eat clover instead of pose. We are walking down into the quarry. Now let's go explore the ancient castle ruin and the newer manor house to learn what the stone from this quarry built. The history of Scotney Castle dates back to the 12th century, when a medieval castle was built on this site. The original structure was a moated castle, and parts of the medieval fortress, including this tower, still stand today, though it's believed 3 other towers formerly existed. The Dara family owned Scotney Castle from the 14th to the late 18th century. During this time, the medieval castle fell into disrepair. In the 18th century, the Hussey family became the owners of Scotney Castle. The estate underwent various renovations, including landscaping the gardens in the picturesque style, a popular landscape design movement of the 18th and 19th century. In 1778, Edward Hussey acquired the estate, and his grandson, also named Edward, later built the new manor house at the top of the hill from sandstone quarried from the valley below. Edward Windsor Hussey left Scotney to his nephew Christopher in 1952. In 1970, the estate was bequeathed to the National Trust by the last resident, Christopher Hussey. This donation included both the new mansion and the picturesque ruins of the medieval castle. Note how the castle is reflected in the moat around it. This area of the castle was the banqueting hall, and now it is the future site of a tropical garden soon to be planted. The archaeologists are coming in so that they can start digging other earth to plant the garden, because in a place like this, if you dig deeper than 30 centimeters, you must have archaeologists present. This oak is hundreds of years old. The old castle is not a folly, and it wasn't left to fall into disrepair nor destroyed by fire. It was instead deliberately ruined to create the centerpiece of the garden being created around Edward Hussey's new house. During the process of building the new house, sandstone was quarried from the garden, and several items from the old castle, such as the hearth tiles in the hall and the fireplace surround in one of the bedrooms, were salvaged from the old castle and placed in the new house. Then the old castle was deliberately, quote-unquote, ruined by removing bricks in such a way that it was a beautiful old ruin, and that through every window you could look out upon the deliberately landscaped gardens for another picture-perfect framed view. Edward Hussey purchased the Scotney estate in 1778. In the 1830s, his grandson, Edward Hussey III, hired architect Anthony Salvin to build the manor house at the top of the hill, overlooking the valley below. 2 generations later, in 1952, Christopher Hussey took ownership of the house and worked to ensure a future for this great country house. He was editor of Country Life magazine from 1933 to 1940 and an architectural historian of British country homes. Thanks to him and the National Trust, we are now able to tour Scotney Castle and its grounds. Fear God and honor the king. That fireplace tiles on the hearth came from the old castle. This is Christopher Hussey, the last owner of the house. The clock on the mantle belonged to Christopher Hussey. It was a retirement gift given to him from Country Life magazine. Sith word is thrall and thought is free. Keep well thy tongue, I counsel thee.
Well, what you think is your business and nobody else's. Once you've said it, it's too late.
This fireplace surround came from the old castle and is dated at least from 1630, if not older. Dwarves Gorging on Melons by Faustino Bocci, painted around 1700. We just arrived at a National Trust property known as Chartwell. It was once owned by a chap named Winston Churchill. So let's go take a little look at Chartwell. Upon entering the estate, we see some pretty views and some interesting plants. Ian is showing the immense size of this rhubarb. It's actually some plant from Brazil called Gunnera manicata or something like that. Churchill is famous for being a political leader and speaker, but he was also a proficient painter. He began painting in the 1920s, as a way to relax and cope with the stresses of his political career. He converted this brick outbuilding into a painting studio. The building has large windows for plenty of natural light. One distinctive feature was a rotating platform for his easel. This allowed Winston to access optimal sunlight throughout the various hours of the day. Another part of the studio that caught my eye was this cigar humidor that Churchill received as a gift from the Cuban government, which he repurposed into a place to hold his paints. Churchill's artistic subjects varied, ranging from landscapes and seascapes to portraits and still lifes. He often painted scenes from his travels, capturing the beauty of the places he visited. Although he had no formal training in art, Churchill's paintings gained wide recognition, and he even exhibited some of his works. Now let's take a turn about the gardens. Of course, I have to highlight the magenta, pink, and purple flowers. But look at these lovely sunset dahlias as well. They are in this beautifully curated walled garden. Also in this garden is this gorgeous golden rose avenue, which as you walk along, you can enjoy a lovely view up to the house. Now let's explore the kitchen garden. This rhubarb just really makes me crave crumble. And here are some nice purpley artichokes. And this fluffy stuff is asparagus, which doesn't really look like it until you look closely down here. One last view over the kitchen garden and beyond in the rain. Seems like a good time to go look round inside the house now. Chartwell is a 16th century Tudor and Victorian home that was the primary residence of Churchill and his wife Clementine from the time they bought it in 1922 until Winston's death in 1965. Though Winston was rather distant from his own parents as a child, he placed a high priority on the family he had with Clementine in his adult life. Winston doted on and depended on Clementine. His famous quote about Blenheim reflects his devotion to her. At Blenheim, I made two very important decisions, to be born and to marry. He proposed to Clementine at Blenheim, and they were married for 56 years and had 5 children together. After the death of their young daughter Marigold, the Churchills bought Chartwell. This estate became a haven for Churchill, where he could retreat into a world of family, painting, and his animals. Dogs, cats, swans, fish, pigs, sheep, and a budgie. I love the fact that Winston and Clementine had nicknames for everyone in the family that were animals. Winston was Pug, Clementine was Cat. Their children were Kitten, Rabbit, Mule, wonder about that one. Their daughter Marigold died when she was 3, but she was known as Duckadilly. And then the Chartwell child, Mary, who was born here at Chartwell, was known as Mouse. They entertained lots of famous visitors here, including Charlie Chaplin, pictured here, and Laurence Olivier. He was always active. After retreating to Chartwell, he would balance his political and literary output with his hobbies of painting, as well as building. He built his children a treehouse, he built walls, dams, and lakes, and went swimming and horse riding with his family. This is the study where Churchill wrote his speeches. You can see his desk is full of family photographs. I love this heraldic flag hung near the ceiling, and this large painting of his beloved ancestral home, Blenheim Palace. Note the stuffed animals in the bookcase. These were placed to mark a spot where Winston removed a book from the shelves, so he knew where to replace it. Chartwell has a very interesting display of Churchill's memorabilia and photos. Here are a few things from that collection. This is Churchill standing here at Chartwell, next to the goldfish pond in 1939. In this photo, you see Churchill viewing the devastation caused by bombs falling on Battersea, South London, the 10th of September, 1940. This photo shows Churchill in Birmingham greeting air raid precaution workers on the 26th of September, 1941. Churchill celebrated his 69th birthday at the end of November 1943, the final day of the Tehran Conference. This summit was the first occasion when the Big Three, Churchill, President Roosevelt, and Marshal Stalin had met together, and this beautiful display shows Churchill's Nobel Prize that he won in 1953. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Winston Churchill, 1940. One more Churchill quote for you to ponder. Go out into the sunlight and be happy with what you see. If you're interested in Winston Churchill, I hope you also check out my video of Blenheim Palace. As an added bonus, you get to see a duck bite my finger. Thanks so much for watching today's video, and do something good in the world today.